So I want to invite you to think this morning about the last set of terms and conditions that you read. You know, the ones where you just click the accept button, you don't read them. It says, do you want to agree to these terms and conditions? And you just go, yeah, whatever, give me my app. A number of years ago, a first-time homeowner arrived at the closing and the signing of all the documents for that home. And the real estate agent presented him with pages and pages and pages of mortgage agreements and covenants and all of these things, and he started to read them. And after about 15 minutes, the real estate agent realized that he was going to read all of them. And it was going to take a really long time. And the agent said, well, you know, if you want, you could just take them home, and if there's anything that you have questions about or you want to write notes about, you know, we can come back and finish this off tomorrow. And so that's what happened. And at that next day's actual closing and the signing of the document, she said, you know, I've been doing this for 25 years, and you're the first person who's ever actually read all the way through what these documents have to say. And I'm thinking about terms and conditions this morning and the extent to which we pay attention to them, or whether we just go, yeah, whatever, give me my app, give me my loan, give me the thing that I want. Because Jesus responds in a seemingly fairly harsh way to some of these people who are coming up to him as he is intent on that final journey that he will take in his earthly life to Jerusalem, and they're telling him that they want to be on the team. Here I am. I want to join you. And he's giving them some responses that seem to be rather off-putting. This would not seem to be ideal recruitment tactics, to be telling people, go away if you can't meet this high threshold. And so it got me thinking, you know, what exactly are the terms and conditions of following Christ? Why is he making a stink at this juncture in time over these people's desire, their well-meaning intention to want to be on his team? And in order to think about that more expansively than just this single gospel narrative, we expand out and we think about the other times and places in Jesus' life and ministry in which he was inviting others to come follow him, and starting with the very beginning of the call of discipleship stories. And those stories where he meets people out by a lake, or he meets somebody under a tree and he says, follow me, and the gospel narratives say that they dropped everything and they seemed to follow him. And it's always struck me as perhaps amazing and perhaps improbable. Because on the one hand, those people seem to not have had much else going on in their life. They just leave everything that they're doing and they just go with this strange guy whom they don't know, and they just commit their life to him. Or perhaps on the other hand, there is something that was particularly inspiring about him, in spite of the fact that there was not at that point in time any longevity of relationship. The Gospels would have us go in that latter direction. And if that's the case, then what was it? What were the terms and conditions, even if they were not made explicit, even if Jesus did not issue them some kind of parchment and say, this is what you're signing up for? And so one of the things that we have observed in the narratives of that roughly 3-year period in which Jesus' primary earthly ministry was taking place is that he was instilling an ethos of blessing in them. Now, it's not exactly a term or condition, But one of the major corporations that your life has intersected with, and my life has as well in our own time, and their terms and conditions have come into our own experience, is Google. And early on, they thought it was clever to share with anybody who wanted to know that one of their founding principles was, don't be evil. You remember that? Remember hearing their Eric Schmidt or Sergey Brin say, oh, we stand for not being evil. Well, that's what they said. I guess that's fine, but that doesn't tell me what you're gonna be. It tells me maybe what you intend not to be, but I'm more interested in the affirmative, not in the negative. And so Jesus' affirmative, one of the foundational terms and conditions of discipleship, was be a blessing. Be a blessing at every opportunity that you have. Take stock of where your life is, what God has given you and blessed you with, and be a vessel of blessing in the world around you. And so he does that over and over and over again, and he goes to easy places and he goes to challenging places, and again he is being a blessing and modeling for them being a blessing. The second one that I would propose is that his life represented a fundamental replacement of a predominant social ethic of response to injury and wrongdoing. And perhaps the most succinct encapsulation of this is the Old Testament reference to an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But when Jesus is wronged in his life, we typically don't see him lashing back in a punitive and retributive way so that those who are his opponents will be sorry that they ever crossed his path. The replacement ethic that Jesus brings is one of sacrifice and forgiveness. And so we hear in this morning's gospel passage, he goes into this town of the Samaritans. He has his mind set on Jerusalem, and there's a lot of kind of theological underpinnings that we need to recall about what it means to be focused on Jerusalem and what it means to be in Samaria. You may remember the parable of the Good Samaritan, and the reason why that was so noteworthy is because the Good Samaritan acted in a kind and generous and caring way that Samaritans would not have been expected to act. They were the people who were on the outside, scorned, and you wouldn't expect much of anything good out of them. And so when he comes into this town in Samaria, and it says the disciples were sent to prepare things for him, and then they did not receive him, what it's telling us is he was rejected there. And if you're really good friends with somebody, if you're on somebody's team, if you've accepted the terms and conditions, then you might take it kind of personally when people reject your teammate. It happens in sports contests all the time, you know. You're not going to disrespect my house. We're going to show you. You can't treat my teammate that way. So the disciples kind of, they get in that snit. And they go, do you want us to bring down fire from heaven to consume them? Did you catch that line? Sometimes we hear scripture and we just like, oh yeah, that's scripture. And oh, the word of the Lord, thanks be to God. What? Do you want us to command fire to come down from heaven and consume them? And Jesus says, no, we don't do that. No, we're not doing that. He turns to them and rebukes them. So part of the terms and conditions of discipleship is we don't do that. When injury to pride or ego take place, when somebody attacks or assaults, our first instinct is how can we de-escalate this situation? Not how can we show them that they're sorry that they ever crossed our path. And that's countercultural. You know that it is. I know that it is. And it's also kind of not very emotionally satisfying. Sometimes you just want to stick it to them and show them how it feels. But part of Jesus' terms and conditions was, we sacrifice so as to model the generosity and the grace of God, and we forgive. Third part of the terms and conditions is, we gather together in community in order to support and to reinforce and strengthen one another. We are better together than any of us would be on an individual spiritual journey in isolation and solitude. We gather together. We reinforce one another. We help one another when we're having low and bad days. Lift one another up, encourage one another, take joy in one another's accomplishments and strengths and virtues. Celebrate being a part of community that exemplifies the character of God in the world. And we share what we found with others. This life of Christian discipleship was a calling to gather. It wasn't a calling to go off and to recite mantras in the wilderness and to be in one's own world of spiritual aspiration. But it was a call to community. And so this is what's happening at the end when Jesus gets into these seemingly spars, these verbal spars with these other people who are saying, I'll follow you forever. I'll follow you wherever you go. And Jesus says, in effect, will you? Seriously? Because where I'm going right now, it's going to be no fun. There's no glory in it. So I just want to check you. This is a time not to hit accept before you read the whole list of terms and conditions. This is a time to really consider what you're signing up for. And then the next person comes and he says, follow me. And the guy says, Lord, first let me go and bury my father. And Jesus says, let the dead bury their own dead. Ouch. Ouch. That's harsh. But there's something going on at that particular moment in which there is movement that has an urgency. So that's okay if the time is not right. One of the things we know about the life of faith is often the time is not right. God's ready, we're not. We're ready, but we don't feel like we can see or hear God's presence, and then we're supposed to wait and be patient. And it's this timing issue. But in this particular gospel narrative, imagine what it would have been like if Jesus sets his face to go to Jerusalem and there's something happening. You got to be there by a certain time. There's the Passover that's coming up on the calendar, and there are important things that happen at the time of the Passover, but you meet a whole lot of people on the way and they say like, well, you know what, I hold on, if you can just wait a week, I need to get time off of work and then I'll hang out with you. And then you go to the next village and the person says, you know what, I've got a lot of business dealings right now, but let me just wrap up a few contracts and then I'll be with you. And Jesus is going, you know what? There's kind of a priority thing going on right now. And it's okay if following me is not the top priority, but I can't wait. I need to go. And so the community is building, but it's also building with the understanding that there's a sense of urgency. And so that brings us to what I would suggest is the fourth in the terms and conditions, which is that we be willing to accept a call upon our lives when God issues it. And it's not always convenient. Sometimes it's joyful, sometimes it's a mountaintop experience, sometimes it's transformative, and other times it's a real pain. Imagine in the Garden of Gethsemane, instead of saying, please remove this cup from me, but not my will be done, but yours, Jesus says, you know, this just really isn't the right time. can I maybe get back to you in 5 or 10 years and we'll kind of do this crucifixion thing when it's more convenient for me? But the life of faith is like that. That when God issues a call in our lives, that there's an intention behind it, that we both are to expect blessings from God, but also need to be willing to be a blessing to others, even when there is some cost to our own selves. And so these terms and conditions of being a blessing, of replacing the cycle of violence and retribution with one of sacrifice and forgiveness, of gathering in community and sharing the gifts of God with others and accepting a call upon our lives, they matter. And it doesn't work if we just click bless me and don't read all of the terms and conditions and make the mistake that the bargain is that once I've found God, my life will be smooth sailing and flowers and balloons, and if anything goes wrong, God must have abandoned me. That's not the deal. It doesn't work that way. But what we know in other areas of our lives is that when we enter into things with great intention, understanding what it is that we're getting ourselves into, and signing up purposely for both the responsibilities and the rewards, those are some of the most fulfilling experiences of our lives. That we may have to go a great distance, but we look back on those times in our lives and we recognize that something transformative has happened and that we are different coming out of it than when we came in. That's the life of discipleship. That's what being intentional about reading the terms and conditions results in. And that is the way that we, as the people of God in Christian community, have something different to offer to the world. We have the realization that what is being extended to us by God is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And it is to be taken seriously, it is to be taken joyfully and gladly, and it is to be shared with other people abundantly to the very best of our ability. So the next time that one of your apps updates and it says, do you agree to these updated terms and conditions? Maybe you'll read them, maybe you won't. But my hope is that in that moment, a little thought might creep in and you might say to yourself, where is God with me in this moment in my life at this time? How have I been blessed? How can I be a blessing to others? How can I draw strength and inspiration and support in Christian community? And how can I be faithful to the best of my ability to God's calling in my life so that I may know as fully and as abundantly as I can the gifts of the wholeness and the fullness of life that God has offered me? That is well worth agreeing to the terms and conditions of discipleship.